Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Liege in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 6, Planning, Chaos, and Confusion. Chapter text. So, we are here to investigate again, huh? He asked as they passed by a dud again. That's right, Byleth said. The amount of duds and murders are raising in a very rapid pace and the neighboring towns are starting to get dragged into this, she said as another dud passed them by. The remaining people in this town doesn't even notice that they are sharing a town with a bunch of corpses, he said sadly as a child passed them by, and by the looks of it, the child was also a dud. Yes, Byleth said, I know it's saddening, but there is nothing we can do now that can save them, she said. The only thing we can do is to eliminate the root cause of all of these, and hopefully the damage is not too severe that it might cause a lingering effect to the remaining people, Byleth said. But I do find something strange, she said. And what is that? He asked as they stopped and rest at the hill overlooking the now ghost town. The amount of duds are many and unusual, Byleth said. How so? He asked. The man is newly arrived in this region and I don't recall hearing anything like this since before the war begun and on the day the war ended, Byleth said. Also, I noticed that there is a particular pattern that the dubs are located in this town too, she said. Really? He asked. Yes, Byleth said. A particular pattern, huh? Arvel said. Could it be Eurobos have a particular purpose for this kind of pattern? He asked. What do you mean? Byleth asked. Well, if he is putting a particular number of dud in a certain spot around this town, then I can say that he is preparing for some sort of a ritual, he said. Plausible, Byleth said, but still it's too many murders and disappearance to put into a ritual, she said. Maybe it requires an amount of, he said. Life forces, Arvel said. What do you mean? He asked. Well, I'm guessing that if he is stealing a life force from someone else, then he might be planning on reviving someone, Arvel said. Say, Byleth, he said looking towards the Archbishop. Yes. Byleth asked. Do you know any spell that can revive the dead? He asked. Byleth looked at him quizzically. Why did you ask? She asked. Just something that comes to mind, he said. And that is? Byleth asked. What if he is doing this for the sole purpose of using a spell of sort to revive the dead? He asked. Byleth begun to think upon hearing him out. There is this one spell that I read about in one of the old text of Great Adrestia, she said. A spell called the Circle of Genesis, Byleth said. And that is? He asked. A type of dark magic that says to revive the dead by giving a massive amount of sacrifices in order to activate dash, Byleth said as realization hit her. Don't tell me, she said turning to him. That's right, he said with a nod. Eurobos is killing and kidnapping a lot of people from this village because he is trying to activate this Circle of Genesis, he said. If that's the case, Byleth said as she stood up, we better start taking action, she said. He grabs her wrist before she managed to run headfirst into action. Wait a moment, Byleth, he said as he gently tugged at her arm to tell her to sit down. What? She asked. Do you think that we are ready to face him? He asked. I mean, I usually go for the run to them and knock 'em dead root, but this enemy is not anything that either of us seems to have faced in the past, he said. Byleth closed her eyes and took a deep breath for a moment. I guess you are right, Byleth said, but what if he begun moving? She asked. Judging from the disappearances lately, he said as he looked over the town below sadly, the setting sun dyed the town crimson as though to signal the end of the town of the dead. I doubt that he is in any rush to activate the spell, he said. All right, Byleth said, but I'm worried about the people of this town or the remaining people, she said, uncertain if she should really start a fight without evacuating the people first. But how can she evacuate the people without alerting Eurobos? She was promptly pulled out of her musing when she felt a warm but firm hand on her shoulder. "Shay?" she asked, meeting his purple orb. "If you are worried about them," Shay said, "don't worry about it, I'll find a way to protect everyone. I promise," he said with a soft smile. "That's why do your best without hesitation," Shay said. Something inside her felt warm and safe upon hearing his words, and more so at the sight of his smile. This made her divert her face away from him. Hiding what kind of expression she have now, to be honest, she doesn't even know what kind of expression she have. That smile, those words, she thought as she looked at the swaying trees. "Somehow I feel assured," she thought as she sneaked a glance at the purple-haired knight beside her. Something about him just put her at ease, and she always finds herself enjoying his company, and she finds herself wanting more time with him. Surely, a puzzling feeling, she thought as she let herself enjoy looking at him a while longer. "I'm so exhausted," he said as he slumped down his bed. "An escape to town and a use of shadow slide thrice, and a battle," Arvel said with a sigh. "Do you need to be surprised by it?" Arvel asked. "Give me a break, Arvel," he muttered as he tossed the towel he is using to dry his hair aside. "Well, Archbishop, have you wrapped around her pretty fingers, which explains why you just used shadow slide thrice for her sake," Arvel said. "She doesn't have me around her fingers," he retorted. "I'm just doing my job," he said. "Whatever you say, great and strong knight," Arvel said. "Not you too," he groaned before he throws his pillow over his face. "Shay!" Byleth called out from the other side of the door. "Byleth!" he called back in surprise, since it's already late in the evening and Byleth ought to be in her own chambers by now. "Can I come in?" Byleth asked as softly as she could. "Just a moment," he said as he looked around for his tunic. "Better hurry," Byleth said. "Sure," he said as he puts his tunic on before he walks towards the door. "Sorry for the wait," he said as opened the door before he is reduced by a gawking mess as he stared at Byleth. Standing on his doorsteps is the Archbishop, wearing only a white camisole and a fur overcoat. "Are you going to gawk at me all night, or are you going to let me in?" Byleth asked as she pulled her overcoat a little closer to her. He cleared his throat upon hearing her lovely voice. "My apologies, Your Grace," he said as he moved aside to let her in, trying not let his eyes wander any more than he should. Byleth gave him a curt nod as she went inside his quarters, carrying a bunch of scrolls and books and documents. "Is there some meeting I didn't hear about?" he asked as Byleth scampered about his quarters, putting her things on his table, chairs, and his floor. "Technically," Byleth said, "I think it's about time to plan our attack before we smoke him out," she said. "Let's hear it then," he said. "All right," Byleth said as she spread the map open. "We do this the simple way," she said. "Hey!" Arvel shouted in his head. He groaned in annoyance and instantly ignored Arvel's shout. "Wake up, you lazy ogre!" Arvel exclaimed. "Leave me alone," he said as he scooted closer to the warm pillow beside him. "No," Arvel said urgently as he started to grab the warm pillow closer to him. "Wake up this instant. I command you to wake up," Arvel screamed urgently. "This smells good," he muttered as he felt something snuggle closer to his chest before a pair of warm unidentified objects wrapped themselves on him in response to him. Arvel heaved a heavy sigh of resignation. "Don't tell me that I didn't alert you," Arvel said tiredly before he went back into the deep recess of his mind. "What are you dash?" he said as he opened his eye only to be greeted by two of the most terrifying sight. First, he saw Seath wide-eyed gazed towards him and whoever is in bed with him. Second, he realized that he and Byleth somehow ended up in the same bed last night, and that Byleth is wrapping herself on him and she is wearing nothing but that camisole of hers. What? He hissed as he abruptly tried to pry himself from her warm embrace, but to his horror, Byleth have him in her iron grip. "Arvel, help!" he shouted to the now silent weird being in his head. "Care to explain why is the Archbishop is in your bed, Sir Shay?" Seeth asked, giving him the stink eye and tapping his foot impatiently. Wait, Seeth, he said as quietly as possible, lest he wake Byleth up, and in this state they are in, it would only spell death for him if she did wake up and found their otherwise compromising position. Well? Seeth asked, looking like he is about to explode any moment now. As he is about to open his mouth to explain as best as he can, the goddess decided to wake Byleth up at that very moment. Drowsy, glassy emerald green eyes opened to the world, and he would have found it beautiful if it wasn't for the fact that he will be dead the moment Byleth managed to fully wake up and found their compromising position. Morning, huh? Byleth muttered before she snuggled deeper into his chest. What warm and nice smelling pillow, she muttered as she rubs her face on his chest. His mouth suddenly went dry as he caught whiff of her scent, and he is tempted to pull her closer if it weren't for the fact that Seeth is giving him a death glare. Wait, Byleth said as she sat up slightly, revealing a very, very appealing sight of her chest as the string of her camisole slid down ever so slightly, giving him a tease of those creamy mounds of hers. And too bad that they are in a life and death situation, since he would have been able to appreciate the sight a bit more, but... Shay! Byleth exclaimed abruptly, pushing him hard enough that the air was knocked out of him as soon as he hit the hard wooden wall of his room. Why are you in my bed? She asked, lifting the sheet to her chest. Wait, he said as he coughed slightly. Seeth. Byleth exclaimed as her emerald gaze landed on Seeth. Why are you dash? Byleth said as she started to look around. Wait, this is, she muttered. May I know why you are in Sir Shay's room, your grace? Seeth said as he pinched the bridge of his nose. Looking like that? He asked, referring to her choice of clothing. This, Byleth said. I can explain, she said. You two better not be carousing in an explicit manner with dash, Seeth said. I assure you that it wasn't like that, Seeth. Byleth quickly said, blushing a little at the implications their current predicament is suggesting. So, what is it? Seeth asked. Byleth looked at him, and Byleth looked away immediately. She said, surprisingly tongue-tied. See, can we talk about this when me and Shay are decent? Byleth said. All right, he said, nodding his head rapidly and hoping that Seeth will agree to leaving them alone, considering that he found them in a compromising situation. I expect a good explanation from you two, Seeth said before leaving them alone. It took them a while to be able to look at each other and a bit longer to be able to talk, but somehow they managed to. He tried to explain to her. What is he going to say? He is so tired yesterday that he probably managed to fell asleep minutes into their strategy meeting. And no need to explain, Byleth said, equally as embarrassed as him. It was my fault for, she said before swallowing a lump that suddenly formed in her throat. Byleth muttered. I know, he said. It's cold last night and I'm the clothes warmer you have, so, he said. Why yes. Byleth said. It's cold last night and why you are the clothes, she said with a nervous laugh. What in Suthy's name is happening with me? She thought. Oh, this is worth coming back for, Suthy's said, chuckling as she watched her stumble with her own words. Suthy's, she screamed in surprise as the goddess reappeared inside her head. I must say, Suthy's said, watching the graceful and confident archbishop being reduced to a love-struck schoolgirl. Suthy's said with an amused grin. It provides me with some entertainment, Suthy's said. I'm not love-struck, she retorted. Don't you dare lie to me, Suthy's said in amusement. I know that you have an otherwise very, very obvious attraction to him, Suthy's said. What? She exclaimed. I don't have any attraction to him, she said, knowing that she must have been turning red by now and that Shay would notice and think she is weird. I just find him amusing and fun to be around, that's all there is to it, she explained. Suthy's hummed thoughtfully. Whatever you say, she said with an amused grin. She don't know if she should be worried about it or not, but the whole monastery seems to have think the same as me, Suthy's said. Oh, Suthy's in heaven above, Calling for me now is futile since I'm currently taking residence inside you again, Suthies said. It's not like. She exclaimed as Suthies laughs at her expense as she fades into her head again, leaving her alone in her thought, and just as she is about to get further into her mind, she suddenly felt some sort of cloth going over her head. What? She muttered as soon as she realized that Shay slid his own tunic on her. Wear it for the time being, Shay said, at least for Seetha's sake, he said, turning his back to her and scratching his cheek with his finger. All right, she said as the scent of pine and woods started to invade her senses, making her realize that she is wearing one of his tunic. For some odd reason, as she sit there, surrounded by his scent, a feeling of calm clarity washed over her, and for her everything seems right, she muttered under her breath as Shay started prancing around his own chamber, and oblivious of the turmoil he have caused her since the day they have met. So, when are we going? He whispered to her as he escorted her to the chapel. Wearing her whole archbishop regalia made him realize his place with her and made him act more formally than he initially do when he is with her. When the morning service is finished, Byleth answered as softly as she could, least she alerted the others. That would be around noon, he said. I'll do my best to give a very very fast sermon, Byleth said. Are you sure about that? He asked. I'm the archbishop, Byleth said. If I say it's gonna be a short sermon today, then it is a short sermon, she said. Then, how about Seeth? He asked. Byleth is quiet for a while. We'll worry about it when it comes to that, she said. He asked. Do you expect me to face Seeth alone? Byleth asked. Wait, that is your fault. He exclaimed. Well, if someone warned me about a certain ingredient in the kitchen, then maybe we didn't spend the whole night cleaning the mess you technically made and received a never-ending lecture from Seeth right after. Byleth retorted. How is it my fault? He asked. And they argued all the way inside the chapel about whose fault it is that the kitchen was unusable for 2 days. The people behind them can only look at the distance blankly. It's only been weeks since the newly minted knight arrived, and the whole monastery is already, well, they are tired of their rather loud banters. As she stand before the congregation, delivering the teaching of Siros, well, her grandmother, her eyes landed on the armor-clad man that have been invading her thoughts in every waking and sleeping moments she have. As she continue her sermon and trying to shorten it, her eyes caught a nun. If she can recall, she is a new nun that hail from the empire and just entered the convent at the same time Shay was knighted. The nun seems distracted by something and keeps on glancing towards Shay's direction. Something in her stomach seems to lurch as she managed to decipher the way the nun is looking at her knight. The longing, the soft and loving look that she secretly throws to Shay doesn't sit right with her. She want to get out of here as fast as she can. She have to get out of here. Something about that gaze towards Shay just doesn't sit right with her. She doesn't like it. And as the goddess send her mercy upon the lands, the sins of men have been absolved. Now let us pray in silence, she said, bowing her head. Now, we are done with the service, she said as she hurriedly got off the podium and walked towards Shay, who have an amused and puzzled look on his face. We are leaving, she said as she grabs his arm and drag him out of the chapel as fast as physically possible. Wait, Shay exclaimed as she drags him faster and faster, ignoring the prying eyes of the congregation. She just wanted to be out of that place as soon as possible, Your Grace, Shay shouted as they went out the door. Unbeknownst to her, the same nun just frowned and gave her a glare as soon as she grabbed hold of Shay and instantly dragged him out of the cathedral. Hey, Byleth, Shay said as she continued to pull him with her. Wait a minute, he said as they ascend the 3rd floor and to her room. No, she said as she let go of his arm. We are moving according to plan, she said as the unknown emotion that seems to burn so brightly earlier managed to simmer a bit. All right, Shay said, confused on her sudden mood swing. Wait, he said as something seems to click in his head as he leans down to her ears. Is it that time of the month? He whispered. That question earned him an elbow to the stomach. Idiot, she muttered under her breath as she went inside her chamber to change out of her regalia and into a more comfortable clothings, leaving Shay recoiling in pain. Well, Shay wasn't the only one confused on her mood swings, and it's only fair that he assumed that she have a visit from Lady Potampkins. She is as well, and she is starting to wonder if he is right, but that is least of their problem now. They have an Agarthan to slay. Chapter 7, Underneath the Dark Sky Eye. Something in his heart broke as they passed by another dub, and more so at the realization that almost everyone in the town will be one too. No use in crying over them, Byleth said. But still, he said as he looked at his boots. Just focus on saving the remaining of the people and to slay Eurobos, Byleth said as she muttered a short incantation before she touched a man on his shoulder. Upon contact, the man dispersed in a flurry of light. He grimaced at the sight. All these people, gone without any preamble just because of one man's ambition to revive someone. You are the one who suggested this, Byleth said as she touched another one, making it disappear. If you want another alternative, then I will hear it, but know this, she said. We won't have enough time to revise our plan, Byleth said. I know, he said. I'm not backing out of it, he said as he looked at another while they disappeared. It's just an unpleasant feeling, he said. Byleth didn't say anything as she make another one disappear. This makes it the 1/3 of the dud, she said. It will start affecting him soon, he said. After all, you are just destroying the key point of his ritual, Arvel said. I know, he said before he looks at Byleth. Byleth, he said looking her in the eyes with a resolute and determined fire in them. I want you to know, he said. What? Byleth asked. No matter what, you can rely on me, he said. I will protect you and what remains of this town, he said. You can count on me, he said. Byleth just stood there perplexed and surprised. Nevertheless she smiled at him in response, just as he did in response to her. Now is your move, Eurobos, he thought as he followed after Byleth to the next dud. Eurobos let out a smug smirk as he added another dud to his plan. The steady flow of his plan brought him joy, and the implications that meddlesome Archbishop and her knight haven't caught up to his plan yet is just the cherry on top. What? He muttered as he watched the dud disappear one by one on the map spread across him. They are destroying the very foundation of the circle, Eurobos said. What naughty little children, he said with a manic grin. Should I punish you too then? Eurobos muttered as the dark mist started to cover him and his dark eyes flashed a monstrous red as the mist enveloped him. When that nun back at Gareg Mach looks at him with looks of adoration and affection, I felt so uncomfortable and uneasy, she thought as she ran alongside Shay. But when he smiled at me like that and proclaimed that he will protect me, it made me happy and assured, she thought as Shay's smiling face and determined eyes flashed into her mind. Why is it that whenever I think of Shay, I can't seem to stop thinking about him? She thought. Such a confusing feeling, she thought. No, I'm in the middle of a mission, she thought, shaking her head. I need to focus on the mission, she thought before she felt a tug on her soul. He's here, Shay said as he draws his sword and summoned his other one. All right, she thought as she draws the sword of Creator and readied herself for battle. The same darkness started to envelope them again. I was wondering who is the pest that keeps on destroying the art I carefully crafted, Eurobos said as he appeared in a flurry of thick dark mist. But it seems a little mouse got lost and started behaving badly, he said. She just scoffed at that before the fabric of time shattered around them and froze around them except for her, which she used as an opportunity to strike a Eurobos and finish this fight in one sweep. But to her surprise, the pulse suddenly wore off and the flow of time continued. What? She muttered as she stopped what she is going to do. Thought I didn't noticed? Eurobos asked with a smirk. Byleth, Shay exclaimed as he grabbed hold of her hand and teleported them out of Eurobos attack. An explosion went out as soon as they are a few good meters out of Eurobos range. Even despite the fact that she is out of harm's way, Shay still have her in his protective embrace until the dust dissipated and debris stopped flying around them. Are you okay? Shay asked as he loosened his arms and started checking her for bruises and injuries. She said, trying to ignore the disappointment as soon as Shay removed his arms from her. Thank you, she said. That night, Eurobos Thought as he looked at the young knight, he managed to move as soon as that time warp have been removed, he thought, well, I'll be, Erebos. Said with a grin as several cards appeared around him, this is turning an even enjoyable fight than I initially thought. Erebos. Exclaimed as the cards falls down around them. What is he planning this time? She muttered. Stay your grounds. Suthies. Exclaimed urgently, something is coming. She said. As if on cue with Suthi's warning, several people raised from those cards, each wore the attire of their stations. There's the Joker, the Ace, the Queen. That's a little creepy, Shay said, a little unnerved as he looked at the uncanny and out-of-place looks of those things. Well, he is a creep, she said as she readied her blade. That I can agree, Your Grace, Shay said as his back touched hers. She managed to parry the fan the Queen is using as a weapon before she swung her blade towards the Queen. The Queen somersaulted in the air, dodging her attack and jumping a few feet away from her and getting ready to charge at her, slit her throat with that fan of hers, and just about the Queen is about to do that, the sword of Creator assumed its whip form, slicing through the Queen's torso and cutting her in half. When the Queen was about to make contact with her, she was met with shredded papers instead, slicing several small cuts on her skin. An after attack, huh? She thought as her crest comes to life and heal her wounds in a flash of light. That weapon, Suthies said. Do you know about that, Suthies? She asked as she dodged the Ace's flurry of diamond blades. If memory serves right, Suthies said. That's Shuffle, she said, a card that can summon whichever unit is illustrated in the cards, and if you managed to destroy them, there would a feedback, and that is those papers for the purpose of making the foe flinched, Suthies said as she parried several blades that was flying towards her. I see, she thought as she made a wrong move and lose her footing as the flurry of those diamond blades flew towards her. Now, die. Erebos said as he shake the bronze bell he is holding. She suddenly feels cold as the blades started glowing. A purple flash appeared in front of her before Shay materialized in front of her, blades formed like a fan. Just as the diamonds is about to pierce him, Shay started spinning his blades as fast as he could, forming a purple tornado around them and intercepting the blades before he stopped and swung the blade in his right hand as purple thick line of wind formed and blowing the blades back to Erebos. As soon as the blades hit the man, a bright light started to shine before an explosion went off as several those blades exploded one by one. She is about to thank him when Shay grabbed hold of her and got her to just in time and out of the charging cavaliers heading their way, spear out as they charge forward before Shay uses abruptly teleported them to another locations as hundreds of arrows rains on where they are previously standing. As the arrows disappeared as soon as they hit the ground, the Joker appeared behind them. Shay just managed to shield her from the dagger. She saw Shay flinching as he teleported them away from the Joker. Shay! She exclaimed as soon as they are out of the attack. I'm fine, Shay said as he stands tall. Just cast the spell and I'll hold them off, he said as he readied himself. She is about to protest when Suthies suddenly spoke up. Cast the spell and leave the depending to him, Suthies said. But, she said as she watched Shay dodging the arrows before he parried the Joker's knife and dodging the attacks in the same time as the arrows keeps firing at him. She shakes her head. You're right, she said. Focus on the enemy, she muttered to Suthies as she started to focus. The magic circle with crest of flame in the middle appeared before her and she started chanting. She is starting, Arvel said. Good, he said as he ducked out of the jester's knife, barely missing the top of his head before he swung his right arm up, which the jester blocked with its knife before she swung the sword in his left arm sideways, slicing the jester. As soon as the jester dissolved into shredded papers, he used Shadow Flash to get out of the way of those after attack, the one that Byleth have the pleasure to see earlier. Not bad, Erebos said with a smirk. I don't like that, he thought as he dodged several arrows. Not one bit, he thought as he saw where the king is. There you are, you bastard, he thought before he uses his shadow slide to teleport to the king. Gotcha, he said as he brought down the blade before a knight impaled him with his sword, and the last thing he heard is Erebos' condescending laugh and Byleth's shriek. Hey! Arvel! Shouted inside his head. Arvel's voice managed to snap him out of his reverie and he managed to dodge the oncoming wave of arrows and to Byleth's side. I could have sworn that Byleth. He thought as he met with Byleth's fearful and relived eyes. Don't attack that yet, Byleth said as she re-established the spell she is casting as she let out a heavy breath. He nods even if he is still unsure of what happened. You felt that too, huh? Arvel asked. I could have sworn that I died, he said. A dream maybe? He asked, or a premonition? He added as he reassessed the situation while standing guard while Byleth cast that spell. Perhaps, Arvel said, for now focus on distracting them while the Archbishop works on her own spell, he said. Right, he thought as he started to form a plan. If he attacked the king then he would need to be careful since the king can summon unit at his behest and one wrong move then something can kill him as soon as he is near the king but he need to this to be fast. I'll be right back, Byleth, he said. Byleth nods. Be careful, she muttered. With that, he uses Shadow Flash to teleport himself towards the king, blade ready to impale it and just as he expected, a knight appear and ready to impale him. He uses Shadow Flash again to avoid the attack and teleport himself behind the king, slicing it as soon as he can before it summoned another enemy and he immediately uses Shadow Flash to teleport to Byleth's side as soon as it becomes shredded papers. Byleth seems to be relatively undisturbed and Eurobos as calm as can get. Something is wrong, he thought. And as if in cue, a dark shadow slowly creep onto Byleth. Damn it, he muttered under his breath as he grabs Byleth and took her to safety. Your wound, Arvel said in concern as he feels his own blood flowing down his hip. I'll be fine, he said as he come charging towards Eurobos who in turn summoned several of those cards and the hearts and aces come flying towards him. He prepares himself to parry everything when Eurobos swung his hand and the small bell on his hand rang out and the aces and hearts started glowing. He waited for the right time to use his Shadow Flash and he found it just in time when both exploded around him and teleported to Eurobos. He smirked as soon as he saw the smile on Eurobos' face disappeared before he swung his sword in an attempt to cut him in half. Eurobos jumped away from him but not without a large gash on his side. His blood dripping down on the ground. He can feel himself getting lightheaded too as he feels his tunic being damp with his blood. You! Eurobos said in rage, I will kill you! He shouted as he took out a thin blade and throws it on the air as fast as he could, creating an afterimage. It took him a while to realize what it is before Eurobos throws to him, hitting him on his shoulder before Eurobos let go of the chain and one by one it started to explode making him remove the chain hastily before it reaches him. He successfully removed the chain but the explosions caught him, throwing him a good feet away from where he initially was, knocking the breath out of him. How do you like Glenir? Eurobos asked with a malicious smile on his face. A chain that no sword can cut, a blade no armor can stop, he said. How many weapon does he have? Arvel asked. I have no idea, he said, but I'm not about to find out. He said as he charged towards Eurobos again and this time he used Shadow Flash to dodge Gleipnir again. Eurobos swing his hand to navigate the chain and the blade in an attempt to catch him again but his Shadow Flash keeps him safe from it. However, when he is about to use Shadow Flash again, something managed to prevent him from doing so and he saw Eurobos' triumphant smile as he let go of the chain and he was caught up in the explosion again. Byleth almost broke the spell once more as soon as she heard the explosion and saw Shay getting caught in it and she would have stopped. Focus! Suthies! Shouted making her refocused on the spell again. Don't let all his effort go to waste, Suthies! Said as she can feel Byleth's distress and fear once more. It wasn't as bad as it was when the boy was killed before she turned back time but it was there nevertheless. Byleth simply nods as she continued to cast the spell. This spell is a lengthy one but a necessary one for their situation. Just as she is about to finish the spell, another explosion went out but this time Shay managed to get out of it before Eurobos appeared in front of Shay and slicing through his armor, wounding him on his chest. Suthies can feel the distress and fear grows even more palpable than before. Cast it now, she said. As if I'll let you. Eurobos screamed as he fired several aces and hearts to Byleth's direction. "No. Shay!" exclaimed in horror as he forced himself on his feet. "I'm not gonna make it," he thought as his mind went to his last resort. "Shay! Arvel!" screamed as Shay used his shadow slide to teleport himself in front of the aces and hearts. He flinched as several of those impaled him when he teleported, catching most of them with his flesh just as the hearts and aces glowed, exploding before it was even close to Byleth. Byleth watched in horror as Shay was impaled by the hearts and the aces before it exploded, throwing Shay's body at her feet, tattered and beaten. Suthies can feel her emotions flowing through her in a rapid pace: rage, pain, terror, horror, and fear. She almost suffocated in them. Deep breaths. "Byleth! Byleth! Suthies!" shouted, trying to snap her vessel to reality. "Byleth!" she called out again. "You know, Erebos said, this would have never happened if you didn't prioritize the mission over your knight's safety," he said with a malicious smirk before she throws Glapinir towards Byleth, wrapping her in its vice grip. "My fault, Byleth thought, still looking at Shay's tattered body. "Byleth! Suthies!" called again, trying to snap her out of her own mind. If only Byleth thought. "Byleth! Suthies!" said. "Maybe I should have killed him as a form of mercy for having such an incompetent master," he said. "No one deserves a stupid and incompetent master," Erebos said as he starts to loosen his grip on Glapinir. Erebos is about to let of the chain when a hand grabs hold of the chain. "What the hell did you say about her?" he asked as he pushed himself on his feet, ignoring the pain. Byleth seems to snap out of her own reverie and looked at him. "Easy," she muttered. "I'll make you pay," he said as he starts to pull the chain towards him, his blade ready to slice this man in half. "I will not allow you to live after you just slandered her," he said as Erebos went from a smug smile to a horrified mess as he comes closer and closer to him. "Let go," Erebos said as he saw the way his purple eyes turned a dangerous red. "Let go," he said, panicking. He knows that as soon as he grabs hold of the chain, Erebos won't be able to let go. Least the end of his chain exploded, but he let go nonetheless as Erebos saw him raising his blade and ready, anticipating the moment he get to cut him in half. The explosion went off and Erebos emerges from the dust, clothing's tattered and injured. "I will kill you," Erebos shouted. "You dare humiliate me like this, you cur. I will make you pay. I will make you pay," Erebos said. "I'll see to it, the time where the past and future are at the crossroads," he said as he disappeared in a flurry of dark mist. He sheathed his sword and make the other one disappeared. "For someone who runs away with his tail tucked between his legs, he sure talks big," he said before he stumbled on his feet and he started falling down. "Shay," Byleth muttered as she caught him. "I'm fine," he said as Byleth helped down. "It's just the adrenaline wearing off," he said. "I'm so sorry," Byleth said. "And why are you apologizing to me, Your Grace?" he asked with a raised eyebrow. "If only I was faster, this could have never happened. If only I was just faster and more focused. I ruined the plan," Byleth said. "You did not," he said. "It was Erebos that ruined the plan," he said. "But I was part of it," Byleth said. "If only I weren't so distracted, then this would have never happened," she said. "If only I was able to respond to danger then," Byleth said. "I'll live," he said. "Besides, this is just a scratch. I'll be able to fight after a rest," he said. "That's why," he said as he reached out to touch her silky seafoam locks before moving to her cheek. "Don't make such a face," he said softly as he caressed her cheeks gently while giving her a gentle and soft smile. Byleth's expression is one of fear, regret, anguish, and horror, and such a thing doesn't suit someone like her. "Huh," Byleth muttered. He continued to caress her cheeks in comfort before Byleth finally responded by holding her hand over his and pressing further into his now bare hand. As Byleth basked in the warmth of his hand and looking at his smiling face, the vessel of the progenitor god, Suthes, and the Archbishop of the Church of Syros and of all Fodlan started to think. I want to be with him forever, I don't want to lose him. Chapter 8, Underneath the Dark Sky 2, Interlude. She is bothered, to be honest. Bothered at how easily Byleth becomes so attached to the young man she is currently fretting over. It's only been a week and a half, but she knows that her vessel's growing feelings of love towards her knight is no lie. It was there and it keeps growing, and festering due to Byleth's rather lack of knowledge when it comes to love. Byleth knows love towards a friend, towards her subjects, and towards her father. However, she never knew this all-too-consuming feeling, the one feeling that would make a person mad when it's unrequited, a feeling that will offer eternity of happiness when it's reciprocated, a feeling of desiring one person to be theirs and theirs alone. Suthes felt it. Her fears when Shay started fighting Eurobos, and the void inside her when she saw Shay motionless on the ground, tattered and bloodied. Are you sure you are okay? Byleth asked as she finished dressing his wounds. I'm, Shay said as he put his tunic back. My wounds are all patched up and some are even healed thanks to you, he said. Byleth looked at him worriedly as the images of Shay's body being thrown at her feet keeps haunting her. I think you should rest more than what initially planned, Byleth said as she runs her hand on his back. I thought you want this done before the mock battle, Shay said as he lay down on the bed in one of the houses in this abandoned village. Shut it, Byleth said softly. It wouldn't do if you fight injured, she said, and putting us in any more danger, Byleth said. Shay simply smiled. No worries, he said as he reached out to rub her on the head again. I have been injured countless times and without anyone to tend on my wounds properly too, Shay said. Thank you, Your Grace, he said. You're welcome, Byleth said. To be honest, she really can't blame Byleth for being attached to the boy. This boy, Shay, is a strange one, caring, kind, a strong warrior, and a very trusting individual, as though he will take what the world told him to word by word and trust in their words without any shadow of doubts. As for Byleth's initial calculating behavior that made her look for any form of deceit underneath the person's mask. Shay is trusting and tend to look at the positive sides of things, whereas Byleth tend to be too distrustful and tend to dig deeper into someone's life. Shay is a rather distant and cold person despite his warm and welcoming demeanor, and Byleth is a warm and welcoming person despite her cold demeanor. Two sides of the same coin, but to her, it works just fine for her since Shay can protect Byleth by whoever will harm her, while Byleth can ease Shay to let people into his life. I want to be with him forever. Suthes heard her, Byleth's innermost wish that she prayed for in the deepest part of her heart, and she can only hope that Byleth choose the right person to spend her whole life away with. These past week and a half is the happiest Byleth have been since Geralt. But why wait until 11 when we can just finish this quickly and have Manuela look at you? Byleth asked as she saw Shay flinch when he tried to move. I wonder why wait for that particular time? Suthes asked. Perhaps his wounds are even more severe than what we see, she said, and instantly regretted ever voicing her thoughts since she started to feel that same fear and dread rise inside Byleth again. Shay must have seen Byleth's expression since he simply smiled. I'll be fine, Shay said. Don't fret about me anymore, Your Grace, he said. I can't help it, Byleth said. I'll be fine, Shay said. Just ask him why he agreed to meet Eurobos in a specific time. Suthes asked. Why wait? Byleth asked. Because Eurobos wants us where he could see us, Shay said. And why is that? Byleth asked. He managed to see through our plan, which is to unleash a large spell all in the name of disrupting the ceremony he planning to conduct, and apparently, he wanted us in his line of sight in order to keep us occupied while he finished the spell, Shay said. And also, he said. What? Byleth asked. I noticed something while he is ringing that bell of his, Shay said. He uses it to activate that weird weapon of his, Byleth said. What about it? She asked. For some reason, Shay said, I can feel some of the life force flowing somewhere, he said. As in, Byleth said, somewhere other than where we are earlier? She asked. Shay nodded. But I didn't feel anything other than those activating, Byleth said before her eyes widened. Do you think that he is using that to cover his actions? She asked. And cleverly so, Shay said. It seems like he is hurrying the ceremony since he now knows we know how to disrupt it, he said. But something doesn't sit right to me, Byleth said. And what is that? Shay asked. Those who are murdered are replaced with duds, which is where he is drawing the power to activate the ceremony from. But where is the disappeared people are? Byleth asked. Maybe, Suthies said. Do you have something, Suthies? Byleth asked. If my memory serves right, Suthies said, those duds' main purpose is to breathe life into the body of the deceased and the other one is to call for the soul of the deceased. Suthies said, I doubt that those disappeared people are dead but was kept somewhere before they become live sacrifice for the ceremony, Suthies said. What? Byleth exclaimed, making Shay jump in his place. Shay winced with the sudden movement. What? He asked. Sorry about that, Byleth said. Just, those people who disappeared, she said. Shay nods. They are human sacrifices to call upon the soul of the dead, Byleth said. That sounds morbid, Shay said with a grimace. Byleth nods. All the more why we should kill him, she said before looking at Shay again, and Suthies can feel that same dread and fear beginning to take hold of Byleth as images of Shay's bloodied and tattered body being thrown at her feet started flashing in her mind. Come on, Your Grace, Shay said gently. I'll be all right, he said before he sat up, albeit painstakingly. But, Byleth said. I'll be all right because you are by my side, Shay said, cutting her off. And I can't afford to look lame in front of the Archbishop, he said softly, because I'm here to protect you no matter what the cost is, he said with determination and conviction. Suthies can feel the warm feeling of her vessel's happiness and she can't help but smile at the sensation. She hoped that the boy will never break her trust in her heart or she will kill him herself. Byleth simply nods and stood up. What are you doing? Shay asked as he tried to sit up. Rest up until evening then, Byleth said as the magic circle with her crest embedded in the middle of it appeared. While I locate where Erebos is and we will finish this once and for all, she said. Those meddling bastards, Erebos said as he tried to heal his injuries as fast as she can with what meager healing magic he have. It will be dark soon, he said. I will heal as soon as night comes, Erebos said looking at the setting sun, and then, he said as he looked towards the coffin, I will see you once more, Erebos said as he walks towards the coffin with is covered with several insignia of spells with stems of spells connecting to the coffin as though to act as a transmitter to some unknown magic. My love, Erebos said forlornly looking at the cover of the coffin that held the crest of Agartha and the crest of the great house of Simone. I will bring you back, he said as his blood keeps dripping to the stone floor of his old home before this place was called Okama Mountains. Before that wretched Suthies comes and claim this land as the stronghold of her people after the 100 days purge that happened after the attack on the Valley of Rebirth 3,000 long years ago. His love didn't make it to Shamhala, none of his family made it in Shamhala, and he never seeked to get to Shamhala as he saw that wretched of a woman slaughtered his whole family. Dying this very home a sickening black as the blood of his people and his family spilled inside this once fortress of comfort and warmth they have called home. He can still hear them, men, women and children alike died by the blade as they attempt to flee from this place, old and young, it doesn't matter, all it matters is that they are Agarthans, no matter if they didn't raise their blades towards their neighbors from Nabatea, all it matters is that they are Agarthans and they are there to disrupt the orders of things in this world and they must be eliminated. He will bring her back. And a small town is a small price to pay. Suthies can only watch in silence as Byleth watched her beloved knight sleep. Every winced, pained groans, and even the way his breathing seems to change, will immediately send Byleth's whole being into a panicked frenzy, and she already lost count on how many times she have to calm her down whenever his face contort into one who is in pain. Byleth jolt up as soon as she heard Shay let out a soft grunt. Shay. She called out. Still alive, Shay said. What time is it? He asked as he sat up painstakingly. Almost time, Byleth said. Are you sure that you'll be fine? She asked. Yes, Shay said as he started to stood up to gather his broken armor. Hey, broken armor is better than nothing at all. Byleth tensed as she saw him tensed a little bit as he begun putting his armor back. Will you calm down? Suthies asked. He have been in several battles and probably have been wounded countless times, Suthies said. He'll be fine, she said. But, Byleth said. Listen, Byleth, Suthies said. I really need you to calm down and listen, she said urgently, which instantly caught Byleth's attention, at least a little. What is it? Byleth asked. You see, Suthies said, and she begun telling her something about 2 of Erebos' weapon. Ready to go? Shay asked as he finished strapping the final piece of his armor. I hope you are right about this, Suthies, Byleth said as she grabbed hold of Shay and climb on his back. Ready, she said. Shay just nods in response before using his shadow flash. Here they come, Erebos muttered as he saw the Archbishop and her gallant knight heading his way in a rapid pace. I wonder whose end will be meet tonight, Erebos said. Mine or yours? He said. Chapter 9, Underneath the Dark Sky 3, The Final Toll. As soon as they managed to land on solid grounds of the roof of the castle, they are met with a rather disturbing sight of several wooden dolls lined up as thought, preparing themselves to greet someone home, and on the end of the line is Erebos, and behind him is a coffin embedded with several spells from the times long gone. Even this castle is surrounded by an ancient spell that makes anything invisible to those who don't know how to locate the spell, which brought his attention to Byleth. Yes, Arvel said. How did Archbishop know how to detect such an ancient spell? He asked. We can always ask her later, he said as he draws his swords and called his other one to his right arm. Considering that you also have the Archbishop wrapped around your fingers, I say that she might just tell you, Arvel said with a shrug. I absolutely don't have her wrapped around my fingers, he said. Shay Byleth called out worriedly. Does something hurt? She asked. If so, she said, and he knows what she is about to say. I'm fine, he said. But, Byleth said. We have no other choice but to fight now, he said as he tried not winced at the pain that shot out from one of his wounds. I'll be fine, he repeated, trying to assure her. He saw Byleth taking a deep breath as though to calm herself down. All right, Byleth said as she drew her sword, but if I deemed that you are too injured to fight, we'll retreat, she said. This town is already damned and the fighting from earlier already drove off the remaining people away anyway, Byleth said. That's, he said, a little heartless, he said. The town is already dead, Byleth said. Why save something that's already dead at the expense of the living? She asked. He understood her reasoning, but the coldness of it made a cold air sweep over his spine, her willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of the mission. Trust me, Arvel said. She wasn't being cold or cruel, she is just looking at things in a logical way, and oftentimes, logic is always accompanied by coldness and cruelty, Arvel said. In order to fulfill one's desires, he said. Arvel? He asked, clearly puzzled by Arvel's words. For all the years they've known one another, Arvel is always a warm champ, so this side of Arvel actually surprised him. My, what a heartwarming scene, Erebos said as he emerged from the darkness. A master so concerned of her knight that she is willing to sacrifice this whole town for him, he said, almost made me shed a tear, Erebos said as the darkness transformed into several dark tendrils around them. What the, he muttered as the dark mist formed several human-shaped shadows. So, he is going all out on us, huh? Byleth muttered as the divine glow enveloped her again. All for the name of my ambitions, Erebos said as the shadows started draw out their weapons and the initially lifeless dolls comes to life. Ugh, he groaned. I don't usually play with dolls, and frankly speaking, I'm never really fond of it, and you can see why," he said as he looks at the stiff movements in which the doll's moves and reminded him of one of those stringless marionette in that one book his stepmother used to read to him when he is little. "I'm glad that I'm not alone in my opinion about dolls," Byleth said, "and not to judge someone else's kink, and that's their business and not mine, but this, well, I find it creepy," she said. "Oh," he said. "I second that," he said. "Are you two done talking?" Erebos asked impatiently. "Oh, pardon us," Byleth said, "we are just too caught up in your rather, warm welcome," she said. "Shall we get started then?" Byleth asked, and he is so surprised that she is so polite about it too, for someone who is about to slice the man in front of them. "A pleasure, Your Grace," Erebos said with a bow as the shadows and the dolls started charging down at them. Byleth immediately let out a light spell of sort, and the shadows that was approaching them disappeared as soon as the spell hit them, leaving only a burnt ground and a dust when the spell disappeared. A doll was cut into shreds as his swords tear through its wooden body, and another was about to attack Byleth when he swung his sword, letting out a purple wind blade towards the wooden doll, effectively cutting it in half. Byleth charged forwards, and he saw her blade being covered by light magic as she swung it, releasing a wave of light spell towards the shadows before several dolls started to attack her in all directions. Byleth spun, forming a bigger circle surrounding the two smaller circles, effectively encasing the enemies in each circle before she embedded her sword on the ground and pounding the pommel of her sword with enough force that it went through the stone walls and releasing a wall of fire around her, engulfing every enemy that was encased in the circles she formed save the inner circle where she is standing. He watched in awe as the wall of fire dissipated and Byleth stood there surrounded by the charred remains of those dolls that dared to attack her. "That's right," he thought as he saw several dolls and shadows heading his way. "Fight without hesitation," he thought as he started to gather every dolls and shadows he can reach by teleporting from all sides and attacking them as fast as he can, without fear, after all, he thought as he teleported above the enemies. His swords crossed over each other and a stream of purple light seeped from the blade in his right hand and into the other blade in his left arm. "I'm here and I'll fight by your side," he shouted as he brought down the swords and let himself fall down on the ground, letting a purple light seep out of the cross-shaped crack before it completely engulfed his enemies. "Here it comes," he shouted towards Byleth, signaling her to duck before dark spears covered in purple flames appeared around him before he sent them flying towards the hearts and aces, making them explode upon impact. The dust of the explosion serves as the cover for both him and Byleth. "Ready?" he asked as he teleported near Byleth. "Always," Byleth said as he grabs hold of her hand before they both disappeared from their spot. Erebos can feel his cold sweat run down his chin as he watched the two fight. The Archbishop seems to take care of the majority of the shadows and the Her Knight seems to take care of the majority of the dolls. The speed of them going through his arsenal is alarming. At this point, he thought as the purple-haired knight appeared behind him. He gritted his teeth as the tendrils around him hit the knight, sending him flying away from him before he summoned the aces again towards the knights. When the aces are near the knight, he rang the bronze bell in his hand to manipulate the life force outside into the coffin at the same time activating the aces. "I don't think so," the Archbishop said as she suddenly appeared in front of her knight, swinging her blade as it assumed its whip form, destroying the aces as it comes closer to them, engulfing them in the smoke of the explosion. He was almost certain that the two was caught in that explosion, and a smug feeling of victory settled on his chest before the smoke dissipated, and where two injured and unconscious bodies should have been is empty. "Try again," the Archbishop said as she appeared from above, blade covered in that same light magic as it hit the flesh of his shoulder. He recoils in pain as he back teleported away from her, blood drips down on the stone floor of the castle. Just what are they planning? He thought as the Archbishop's green aura was tainted by a purple light before she disappeared from his view and behind him with her blade ready. He barely dodged it as she swung it, aiming for his lower back before she made the blade assume its whip form and swinging it back to his direction, but this time he is ready to intercept it and use it to his advantage, but to his surprise the tip of the whip disappeared in thin air, but he can still it being connected to the blade before a loud crash was heard behind him, where the coffin of his beloved is. His blood went cold as he looked behind him, witnessing how the Archbishop's blade destroyed the only reason why he endured living for 3 millennia. He screeched as he saw the coffin being engulfed by blue flames before it turned the body and coffin to ashes, finally destroying the last bit of his happiness into dust. Bastard! He screamed as the dark mist around them started to swallow everything in its path. Do you think you already won, Archbishop? Do you think I will let you live? He screamed as he started ringing the bronze bell. I will destroy you and take your precious monastery along with you. He said as he felt the remaining duds feeding into a different spell before the ground she is standing on collapsed underneath her. L.E.T.H. Suthies called out. Wake up! Suthies said. She groaned as she opened her eyes and her senses started coming back to her and she felt all the pain and soreness in her body, save for one. My arm, she thought as she tried to move her sword arm but to no avail. Suthies, she called out. I got it, Suthies said as the crest of flames flared to life and started healing her injuries, but despite it giving her an extra boost of energy, she still feel winded. It's understandable that you will feel fatigued despite the crest of flame helping you out, Suthies said. It took everything for both of us to receive that weird power from your beloved knight, Suthies said with an affectionate laugh. Yeah, she said, not even bothering to correct Suthies in regards of her beloved knight, but it sure is handy, she said as she slowly get on her feet as some of the dust fell down on her when the floor above her starts to shakes. What is happening? She asked as she tried to ignore the protest her body is telling her. Your beloved and gallant knight have been fighting Erebos while you are still out, Suthies said. Then, she said, struggling to get her body moving again. I better join up with him, she said before wincing when she somehow felt a pain in her abdomen. I know you want to help him, but in your condition right now, Suthies said, you'll be more a burden than a help to him, she said. I just need, she said, to remove that ring and then I can hit him with a spell, she said before a glint of silver caught her eyes. What is that? She muttered as she looked at the too small container. No idea, Suthies said. Maybe it's a tool or something, she said. Who knows, she said as she tucked it away in her pocket. Either way, she said as she slowly makes her way to the way up to the roof. I have to help him, she said as she started to climb. She have to help him. Images of his tattered and bloodied body started to flash in her mind again. Byleth, he will be fine, Suthies said. I know, she said as she slowly climbed out of the rubbles. But dash, she said as she reached the top and just in time to see Erebos slashing Shay on his chest. As soon as he saw his liege falling down, as soon as the floor underneath her collapsed, his body immediately went to action and run to her direction in order to at least follow her to floor down below and make sure she is safe. But a dark pillar blocked his way before a dark mist in the form of a shadow whizzed past his ear. Not a chance, Erebos said blankly as he reached out to dark mist. I will make you suffer, he said as he draws a sword from the dark mist. I will make you suffer the feeling of losing the reason for living, Erebos said as tears streams down his cheeks. This pain, I will make you feel this pain, he said as he covered one of his eye with his hand before letting out a broken laugh as tears keep streaming down his face before the mist covered him. He back away with his blade ready and started to look around. He barely managed to dodge the sword that emerges from the darkness before another emerges, which he barely parried before another and another. There is no end to this, Arvel said as a sword almost scraped him on his back. He is trying to wear you down, he said as he can now feel the events earlier catch up to him and his once fluid and fast movements is beginning to become labored and slow. I know, he said as he was pushed backward from a particular stab that met his blade, effectively disarming his left hand. Damn it, he muttered under his breath as the sword disappeared in the dark mist. I got you now, Erebos said as he comes out of the shadow, hitting him on his arm with his claw. He flinched in pain as blood drips down his arm before Erebos appeared behind him, hitting him on his side and then again and again, hitting him at point blank. What now? Arvel asked. I'm thinking, he exclaimed as he managed to dodge Erebos but not able to dodge the attack on his left side and effectively cutting on his left cheek the darkness. He exclaimed. What? Arvel asked. If I can disperse that mist, then I can fight Erebos head-on. He thought as he jumped out of Erebos' way before he ducked out of his sword that would have cut his head off. It's worth the try, he thought as his blade was enveloped by both the purple light and the light magic from when him and Byleth combined their powers together, and waiting for the exact moment for Erebos to emerge from the dark again, and he didn't even wait long for him to appear again, and he easily dodged out of his way before he swung his blade and letting out a combination of light magic and his unknown magic, cutting through the dark mist by and by until the outline of the night sky become visible, and he effectively managed to dispel whatever Erebos magic is. You think you are so clever, Erebos said as he stood before him. Blood from his wound earlier keeps dripping to the stone floor. You think you already won? He asked as he readied himself, but it's obvious that Erebos is starting to get weary just as him. Fight me fair and square, you bastard, he said, pointing his sword to Erebos. This time no trickery, he said. Erebos managed to smile before charging towards him. With that they exchanged blow by blow, parrying, blocking, and dodging each other's attacks until he managed to break through and stab the man on his abdomen. I did it, he muttered, panting and fighting through pain since his wounds from earlier opened up and his tunic is starting to get soaked by his blood. Yes, again, whelp, Erebos said as he raised his sword and swung his blade on his chest. He let go of his sword, making it disappear at loss of his grip. He falls down on the cold stone floor and his view turned to the sky. All the while he felt his powers going into an overdrive, altering his appearance pro and forth. Arvel! He called out to the being inside him urgently as he tried to get his power under control once more. I'm trying. Arvel said as he felt some sort of barrier inside him. How do you like it, Erebos asked as dark smoke started to rise out of him and his wounds started healing. This one is known as Grim, Erebos said as he showed him the cutlass, black metal glimmer in the light of the moon, a blade that said to separate a divine being away from a mortal, he said, breaking their feeble containers, forcing this so-called gods to retreat to where they come from, Erebos said with a laugh. He tried not to scream as the pain of his body being torn apart festered inside him. This is goodbye then, gallant knight, Erebos said as he readied himself to ring the bell. He is going to activate it, he thought. Him and Byleth knows that the moment Erebos rung the final toll of the bell, then, the town, the monastery, everyone will die. Just as Erebos is about to wave his wrist, a dagger whizzed through his fingers and to the bell, destroying the bell beyond use and removing the ring and Dovri from Erebos' hand. He managed to catch the ring. Damn you! He shouted as he charged towards the one who threw the dagger. Byleth! He shouted, trying to get on his feet as his eyes landed on Byleth, who is struggling on her feet, ignoring the way Arvel's power keeps on tearing at his soul. All he knows at this moment is that he needed to get to Byleth. He have to reach Byleth, but his shadow flash is not working and it only serves to hasten the effect on him. You damned Nabatean whore! Erebos said as he swung the sword on Byleth's chest. No 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 no! He shouted as he falls down on his chest just as Byleth started glowing that familiar green aura, but this time, the aura seems to be consuming her instead of just taking her in its protective embrace. Feel my pain, you worthless cur! Erebos said. And when they expect a gush of green light shooting off in the sky, instead a green and white fire and light started to illuminate the night sky, and as the same fire and light started to engulf Byleth's motionless body, the flame and light started to form a gigantic dragon that seems to stretch endless into the sky. The dragon let out a mighty roar that resounded throughout Fodlan before the head of the dragon went down. Green serpentine eyes glared down at Erebos and white flaming claws gripped each side of the castle, while its fiery body seems to extend endlessly from the town below to the nearby forest and to the sky above. Insolent fool, the dragon said, to think that you can raise your blade towards my vessel, it said. The progenitor god of Fodlan, Erebos said as he loosed his grip on his sword. The goddess, Suthes, he said. But how? Erebos muttered. This vessel born of Nabatea and of Adrestia is the perfect vessel for me. The goddess of all Fodlan, Suthes said, a vessel so perfect that she is able to house me and use my powers without any form of consequence, she stated. Erebos stood there gaping as he stared in awe at the dragon. No, at the goddess as she started to deliver her sentence to this sinner of a man. For the crime of destroying the very nature of life and the attempt to disrupt the very nature of the cycle of life and death, Suthes said, endangering the life of my vessel, of my family, Suthes said as he saw her mouth started to emit smoke. Take this, Suthes said as she opened her mouth, the divine flames of retribution. She said as the green and white flames shot out of her mouth. Erebos smiled maniacally as the flame engulfed him. Just as the white flames engulfed him into its fiery arms, his vision gradually turned darker and darker, until there is nothing. No more pain, just no more. Where? He thought as his eyes was meet with the violet sky of the dawning sun alive. He thought before looking at his hand that still held the ring of Andovri and feeling his life force rapidly draining due to the cut that Erebos made on him. What is happening? He thought Arvel. He called out but was met with silence. I guess, this is the consequence of that cut, he thought. Just as his eyes was closing and he is starting to fade away, a pair of small hands grabs at his own, surprising him as he felt the gentle and comforting warmth he have grown to love. He turned his eyes towards the owner of those warm and loving hands and was met by Byleth's gentle and soft smiling face, eyes shining in that beautiful light whenever she managed a smile from the very bottom of her gentle heart. Such a beautiful smile, to think that your smiling face will be the last thing I will see before I go, he thought, smiling in what he hoped is a loving smile. All things considering, this is not a bad way to go, he thought. Hey, there, he greeted Byleth. It seems like his ring protected me from Suthes' flame, just my luck, he said. I say that you are a very lucky fellow, Byleth said with a soft chuckle just as she tightened her grip on his hand. But, he said as Byleth tightened her hold even more, it seems my luck runs out, he said. I will go soon, I say I was long overdue now, he said, remembering the day his mercenary company was wiped out and how he is supposed to die that day too, and how he is supposed to be wiped away from the face of the earth, with no one to tell his memory and of his deeds, of his existence. He is afraid to die that day because he would be forgotten in the never-ending flow of time. But now that Byleth literally came crashing into his life, he knows that his memories won't be forgotten. Say, Your Grace, he said. Yes. Byleth asked. Is it silly that I, even now that I'm on the verge of death, is still thinking of how will I explain this to Seth? He asked, turning himself a laugh from Byleth. Yes, Byleth said, a very silly motion for a very silly man, she stated with a soft laugh. And no melody in the world is more beautiful than the melody of her laugh, the very song of her happiness, and what a beautiful song it was. He can only wish he can listen to it for the rest of his life, but this short and fleeting moment will have to do. Yes, silly fool that done nothing but look lame in front of you, he said, smiling at her. Yes, Byleth said as her laughs subsided. Lame, she muttered. He can feel warm all over his body as he admired her smile and listened to the sweet melodies of her laughs, a worthy gift he can take to the afterlife. Say, Byleth, he said as he can feel his heartbeat slowly getting quiet and his soul starting to fade away. Byleth hummed in response. Will you remember me? He asked. What do you mean? Byleth asked. I want to know that if you won't forget me, even after I die, that no matter how short our time together, at least I know that I somehow made an impression on you, he said. Byleth simply smiled, and that's all he have to see to know that Byleth won't let him fade away amidst the ever-changing world. Can I tell you something? He asked. Go ahead, Byleth said. These past week and a half is the happiest I've ever been since my stepmother, he said. Even if I'm only with you in such a short time, I truly enjoy our time together, he said as started to close his eyes, meeting my end while the gentle breeze of the wind lulling me to a peaceful slumber, doesn't seem so scary anymore, he thought as he was met with silence, more so that I get to be by her side until the end, he thought. Before he heard the gentle sound of the wind started humming in his ears once more, which made him open his eyes abruptly before he sat up in the same manner. What? He thought as he checked himself for something only to find none. Well, none other than three laughing voices, that is. Byleth's end. Thought we would let you off the hook that easily, huh? Hey. Little girl said with a chuckle, must I remind you that you still need to comply to what my vessel have asked you to do, she said. And here I thought that you managed to run into the most troublesome woman in all of Fodlan, but I never expected for you to have the luck to run into the most troublesome duo in the whole world. Arvel said. Shut your mouth, imbecile fool. Suthies said, comparing to us, you two are even more troublesome. Suthies retorted. And how? Arvel asked. Are they always this loud? He asked as he blocked out Suthies and Arvel. Who knows, Byleth said as she blocked out Suthies and Arvel. So, he said, how am I alive? He asked. Good question, twerp, Suthies said. Did she just called me a twerp? He asked. Indeed she did, Byleth said with a giggle before stopping and smiling again. Hey, that rhymes. She exclaimed. Okay, Byleth is expressive, but she usually isn't this expressive. Not a bad change though. Ready to listen now, grape-headed twerp? Suthies asked. Grape-headed? He muttered. The reason that you are still alive despite the fact that Erebos managed to break into the barrier that is preventing Epimens to break your soul and your body apart is because of the Tulkina, Suthies said. Wait, what barrier? He asked. And who is Epimens? He asked. Allow me, Arvel said. The sword grim is originally mine, he said. And why do you have such a weapon? He asked. It's the prototype of the same sword you are using now, except this one have only one function, and that is to create a rift inside a person's body, well, a vessel if you will, Arvel said, and also, my real name is Epimens, Arvel added. Like me? He asked, ignoring that little bit about Arvel being Epimens. An archbishop over here, Arvel said. In my case, I used it to destroy the vessel of those Nabatean to force them to assume their true form, and then, Arvel said, they'll be easy picking for those anti-dragon ballistas and trebuchet once they are in their true forms, Suthies said. Exactly. Arvel said. So, how is it that you didn't break my body, and also, how is Byleth still here when Suthies clearly bust through her? He asked worriedly. Don't fret, twerp, Suthies said. Byleth is the perfect vessel for me, she said. She is not affected by that weapon. All it serves is to summon me in my full power and allow me to stay in that form as long as I can without worrying if I will consume her eventually, she said. Thank goodness for that, he said. And then, Byleth said as she pulls out a pendant from underneath a piece of cloak that was currently covering her. This, she said, showing him a silver and gold pendant with a glowing stone that seems to house a white and green flames within, is the tool, kinda, she said. She let it dangle in front of her, a tool to prevent such a thing to happen by having it absorb a Nabatean's power, Byleth said, and act as container to house their powers while they assumed their human form, she said. Suthies actually made this, and there is only this two remaining now, which is mine and yours, she said as Suthies hummed a prideful response to her. Or in her case, to contain me, Suthies said, since she needed something to keep her lifeline stable since that sword destroyed the crest stone inside her. She needed something to keep her from dying, Suthies said, to prevent me from destroying Fodlan, she added. And that is to continue to house Suthies, and this time instead of a vessel, she is my partner of sort, Byleth said. We are now separate beings, and with that I can unlock some of her powers that was not available to me back then, she said. And the same goes to us, Arvel said as Byleth held out another to him. We are not sharing a body anymore, instead we are partners in all senses of the world. I can still lend you my powers, but with this you can use some of the abilities I have that wasn't available to you then. Arvel said proudly. And what unnecessary ability is that? Suthies asked. And the two begun arguing again. So, in conclusion, he muttered, ignoring both Arvel and Suthies. Yes, you are still my knight and my partner, Byleth said. So, any complaints about our arrangement? She asked as she reached out her hand. He smiled. None, he said as he took it. And that settles it, Byleth said as they both shake hands on it. Suthies and Arvel groaned. Guess we are working together, Suthies. Muttered begrudgingly. Just my luck, she said. I should be the one complaining, overgrown lizard, Arvel said. What did you just call me? Suthies asked. You, try hard edgy soft boy. She shouted. So, he said, ignoring the two again. What? Byleth asked as she got on his back. How are we going to explain this to Seath? He asked as he saw the sun rising, signaling a new day once more. I was hoping that you have an idea, Byleth said as he readied himself to use Shadow Slide. I was hoping you would, he said. Well, we'll somehow think of something, Byleth said. Well, we better think quick, he said. Chapter 10, The Aftermath. He pulled out the ring of Andovri from underneath his tunic as he sat down on the steps of the training grounds and admired the craftsmanship of the ring. From the strong structure of its gold and silver foundation to the gleam of the precious stones embedded on it will surely entice anyone who will ever lay their eyes upon such treasure, not knowing the power it hid underneath its beauty and radiance. You seemed bored, Arvel said through the silver pocket watch hanging on his hip. Well, I was suspended for a week and Her Grace is under house arrest for a week, he said. No one to talk to and no mission to go to, he said. You are quite lost without your lady accompanying you all the time, Arvel said. Well, he said looking at the night sky above, she have been a constant for a week and a half, he said trying not to think how lonely he is without Byleth. Still training? Alois asked as he arrived inside the training ground. Good evening, Alois, he said as soon as he saw the older knight. Do you ever take a rest, laddie? Alois asked. I can't rest yet, he said. I need to finish my regiment and dash, he said before he winced in pain. Well, you ought to rest, Alois said. Your wounds haven't healed yet, laddie, he said. I'll be fine, he said feeling pain shot up. See, Alois said raising an eyebrow. I say, this is why Seath put you on suspension, Alois said. To force you to rest, he said. I don't need a vacation, he said in frustration. I need to be stronger, he stated. Lad, Alois said. You are strong enough, he said. Not enough, he said as he remembered how Byleth almost died on his watch. I need strength, more strength, he muttered before he turned to Alois. That's why, he said. What? Alois asked. You have studied under the tutelage of the Blade Breaker, right? He stated, which Alois nodded. Then, teach me, he said. I don't need to be as strong as her or Geralt, he said. I just need enough to be able to protect her, he said. Alois blinked at first before smiling. I wonder if that is a bothersome request, Captain? He asked bashfully. Not at all, laddie. Alois said. I would gladly take you under my tutelage, he said. He smiled at Alois' response. But know this, laddie, Alois said. I won't go easy on you just because Her Grace is quite fond of you. I would train you until your body gave and screamed I'm sorry, Alois said with a hearty laugh. Arvel let out a soft groan. Get it? Alois asked. Sorry and sore because, he said. Of course, he said before letting a nervous laugh. Unbeknownst to the two of them, Byleth is listening to them behind the pillars. Well, isn't that worth the trouble of sneaking out of your room, Suthies? Said as Byleth left her spot as quiet as she did. A smile plastered on Byleth's face, and anyone who would have seen it would have thought that she would have illuminated the darkness of the night. It was the brightest and happiest smile she is able to muster. He jumped out after Byleth gently nudged the bandaged covered bruise on his cheek. Your Grace, he said. That, Byleth said with a mischievous smirk as she motioned to the bandage, is just begging to be poked at, she said. It wasn't for you to poke, he said. Technically, it is hers to poke, Suthies said. Arvel hummed in agreement. She is your boss after all, he said. It's rare for you two to get along, Byleth said. Don't get used to it, Your Grace, Arvel said. We just like poking, Suthies said before letting out a chuckle. Fun at this gallant and strong knight, Suthies said. I guess I can give you two a pass when it comes to that, Byleth said. Plus, I do poke fun at him every now and then, she said. He groaned at this. Take that as mean that we love you, Arvel said. Yeah, just like how friends poke fun at each other because they are familiar with one another, Suthies said. Or you guys are just being mean, he muttered. Now, Byleth said, patting his back gently. At least I just poke fun at you sometimes, she said. Is that supposed to make me feel better? He asked. Is it working? Byleth asked. He stared at her for a bit before he shrugged his shoulders. Strangely enough, it does, he said. Byleth simply smiled. Good, she said. Does that give me a free pass to poke fun at you, then? She asked. If it makes me see your smile often, then go ahead, Your Grace, he said. I hope they know that we are in the middle of the dining hall, Arvel said. You know, surrounded with several other people, he stated. I don't think they noticed, Suthies said. Then, do something, Arvel said. Your vessel is the one who started this by appearing in her life. You take this, Suthies said. Well, at least mine isn't trying to strip yours naked with his eyes, Arvel said. She isn't, Suthies said. I wasn't, Byleth said. Oh, you two are done. Good, Arvel said. Eat your food already, Suthies said. You are spoiling the delicious and scrumptious meal for everyone with your shameless gallivanting with each other, she said. We are not. Both him and Byleth said. Someone said from behind them. Both him and Byleth looked behind them. Byleth clenched her fist in response as she saw the same nun again, as she felt that same discomfort and burning feeling inside her chest. Good morning, Ms. Durstein, he greeted the young nun with a smile. Gee, good morning to you too, Sir Shay, the nun said with a soft smile. She said, stuttering and diverting her eyes away from him. He just smiled as he sat up and walked in front of the young nun. Yes, he asked, bending down to meet her downturned gaze. What do you need? He asked softly with a friendly smile. The nun blinked a few times before managing a smile of her own. Actually, she said as she revealed what she is holding. I made you something, she said. Again? He asked, quite surprised as he took the bag holding a container of sort. I'm sorry about the bother, he said. It's no bother at all, the nun said. I actually like doing this for you, Sir Shay, she muttered. He said, suddenly felt tongue-tied. Thank you, he said with a soft laugh. He is about to say something when Byleth suddenly took hold of his arm. Again, he exclaimed as Byleth started dragging him out of the dining hall. Despite having a charisma of a slug, Suthies said, he is surprisingly popular with the ladies, she said. It's his stupidity, Arvel said. It's what makes him so charming to a lot of women, he said with a sigh. Suthies can only agree as Byleth keeps dragging Shay away from the dining hall as fast as physically possible. And just like that, a normal day have passed by. Check the description for the links to the author.